Hello everyone and welcome to a really awesome game from the 35th edition of the Leon Masters. It is Andrey Esipenko versus the legend Boris Gelfand, and you guys basically requested at least one game from this match because this is the semifinals. The winner of the semifinals gets to play Vishwanathan Anand for the finals of the 35th edition of the Leon Masters, and this is the game that I have chosen as it features a wonderful line against the Sicilian defense, one line that I particularly enjoy playing in faster time formats, and it includes the absolute strongest move there ever was in chess altogether, but we'll get to that. So basically the format that they use is they play 4 rapid games. If the 4 rapid games end in a draw, then we have 2 blitz games, 3+2, the time control, and then if that ends in a draw, then we have the Armageddon. And this is what happened in the actual match. So they played all of those 7 games, and then of course a winner emerged. We're gonna discuss this a little bit later, but this is the game I want to show you. It's the second game of the Rapids, and it is truly an enjoyable one. So let's dive straight into it. Esipenko has the white pieces, and he opens with pawn to e4. We have c5 by Gelfand. He goes for the Sicilian defense. Knight to f3, knight to c6, and now bishop to b5, going for the Nimzovich-Rossolimo attack. Pawn to e6, we have castles, and the knight g to e7. And this is all very, very standard stuff, but this is where Esipenko plays a move that has never been played in this position, of course, in top tier competition, and that is pawn to b4. And that is a move you usually see in some very tricky openings, like maybe the Evans Gambit, or maybe, some other sidelines where you want to challenge the c5 pawn. But here it's incredibly tricky to pull it off because well, it's just not as powerful as in the Evans Gambit, but still it's very, very tricky to play it. Now here Gelfand could capture the pawn with the pawn. If you go something like this, then we could go pawn to d4, then we grab the full center, or we challenge the structure even further. We play a3, challenge the b4 pawn. If b captures, then we play d4, then we can capture with the knight, with the bishop, and so on. However, here Gelfand shows that he is that he knows his stuff, and he plays knight captures on b4. Even though this is the engine's second recommendation, it is somewhat easier to play with black, and also when you play this with white, you prefer when people just capture with the pawn, because the pawn leaves the center, and that's kind of what you want to do. So here c3, challenging the knight, and here Gelfand again doesn't go back right away. Now if you go back, then d4, and then you are playing right into white's hands. But here we have a6, challenging the bishop, now asking, okay, if you move the bishop, then I'm gonna move the knight back. But also I think Gelfand does this because it's a useful move. You want to play it at some point, regardless of when you move the knight, but also maybe to force Esipenko to burn a bit more time. So here Esipenko decides to capture the knight. It is by far the strongest move. A captures on b5, and now b captures on c5, and Boris plays b6, challenges the c5 pawn, and now offers the trade on b6. And now if you look at this, white tried to sacrifice some material for rapid development, but Boris said, nope, I will not be accepting any material today. I also wish to develop my pieces rapidly. So here d4, grabbing the center, b captures on c5, and d captures on c5, now with full control over the d6 square. So knight to c6, developing the knight. Now also you regain some control over the d6 square, and now bishop to e3. We have bishop to e7, preparing to castle, and now comes pawn to e5. Now Esipenko fully controls the d6 square, and if you imagine, let's say, this knight being on d6, that could be a problem, or maybe this knight c3, knight to e4, knight to d6. So Boris has to be very careful here, and you could consider castling here. You could consider definitely playing b4 here, preventing knight to c3. You could consider a lot of things, but Boris plays f5. He says this will be very useful. I want to castle kingside, and you will it will be much harder to attack the king side with this pawn advanced here. And you don't really care about weakening the position because the pawn will remain on d6, on d7. It's not very likely that this pawn will be able to move. So here, knight to c3, we have bishop to a6, now defending the b5 pawn, and rook to e1. It makes sense to move the rook from this diagonal. We have castles by Gelfand, and now knight to e2. We have queen to c7, continuing development, putting pressure on this e5 pawn, and knight to f4. And now what is happening here? Is this a free pawn? Basically, not really. If you go for knight captures on e5, then we're gonna capture, and after queen captures, then white queen captures on d7, and this is now a problem. The bishop is hanging, the pawn on e6 is hanging. You already created a passed pawn, so you don't want to do this. So instead, we have knight to a5, and now we have a pawn to h4. Esipenko starts marching forward with the pawn. He wants to open up the king side. Knight to c4, attacking the bishop, and the bishop to d4. So everything is solid for the moment. Bishop back to b7, as the bishop no longer is useful on this diagonal. So bishop to b7 will be much more useful here. Knight to g5 now. We have bishop to g5, removing one of the attackers. H captures, and now rook to a4. Now the rook can be shifted throughout the entire fourth rank, and also it's quite a nice square for the rook. The other rook might also join him. Rook f8 might be played. So queen to b3, putting pressure on the b5 pawn, and now bishop to c6, defending the pawn. And here Gelfand's position is just much better. It's very hard for white to get the rooks into the game. The bishop isn't all that useful, you know, just guarding the two pawns. It's very hard to make use of the knight. And here you could play something like g6 to try and make it a little bit trickier, but of course black will play h6 and nothing is really happening here. However, after Esipenko's move rook to e2, Boris can now win the game by force, and it's quite a nice thing to spot. So feel free to pause the video here and try to find the absolute strongest idea for Gelfand while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this incredible idea. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook to a3. Rook to a3, point being, and congratulations to everyone who found this, the point is you want to play queen to d8. You want to go not after the pawn, you just want to grab hold of this diagonal, and then if the pawn moves, you can even move the queen to h4. The problem is if you play this now, white will just play queen to g3, guard the pawn, and then the queen will also help out with the defense of the king side. By playing rook to a3, you make this impossible, and you also add another attacker into the game. So here you could go queen b4, queen to c2, queen to d1. Queen to d1 was played in the game, and now Gelfand plays queen to d8. He goes after the pawn, and there aren't all that many ways you can defend this pawn. For example, if you play something like knight to h3, we are very happily capturing this knight. Rook captures on h3, also one of the reasons why the rook is so powerful here. And of course, if the rook is captured, queen captures on g5 check, and now you will just get checkmated. So instead we have g6 here, trying to stir some trouble, but just queen to h4, completely ignoring this pawn. We have queen to c1, you have to defend the knight on f4, so queen to c1, also you put pressure on the rook, so now the knight can't move. H captures on g6, and now bishop to b2. Again, if you play knight captures, then the bishop hangs. So bishop back to b2, attacking the rook, and now Gelfand plays pawn to g5. Now puts pressure on the knight, he offers the rook on a3. First, knight to g6, attacking the queen here, queen to h5, and now knight to e7 check. Esipenko saves the knight, and he will capture some material later, but after king to f7, there really isn't a good move here for Esipenko. Now, in the game, knight captures on c6 was played, Boris played rook to h8, and it was in this position on move 29 that Andrey Esipenko resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. You are getting checkmated, and that's pretty much it. If f3, it's still insufficient. We just play rook captures on f3. Also, one of the reasons why rook to a3 was such a powerful idea. And now your position is completely busted. If g captures, now you play queen h1 check, king f2, and you checkmate the white king. King g3, rook h3 check, king f2, and now of course we end with rook captures on f3 checkmate. But even if in this position Esipenko did not go after the bishop, if you play something like f3, makes sense. Now you can start running away with the king right away. Still rook h8, and after, let's say, bishop captures on a3, now you eliminate the rook, so you don't allow any captures here. Still just queen to h1 one check, king f2, queen to h4 with check, king g1, and now bishop captures on f3. You shatter the king's defenses either way. G captures, queen h1 check, and now it's gonna be the exact same checkmate with rook h3 check, king f2, and now rook captures on f3. So really incredible stuff by Boris. I really liked the attempt Esipenko had here with this beautiful b4 pawn move. I pretty much played this in all of my bullet games, and most of my blitz games when playing against the knight c6 Sicilian. And you always get some very exciting play if you can, you know, sacrifice some pawns here, create a strong center, much like you would, for example, in the Evans Gambit. But here, against a legend like Boris Gelfand, it did not, you know, go through, and Boris takes the win with the black pieces. Now, also, what is interesting about this match is that the rapid section, both of them won 1 game and 2 games were drawn. So they went into the blitz section. There, Esipenko won 1 game and Gelfand won 1 game, and then they went into Armageddon, where Boris had the black pieces, and it was a rook endgame, equal material, everything completely equal, but Esipenko lost on time. But okay, even if he didn't, since it was an Armageddon game, if it's a draw, then the player with the black pieces wins, so Boris would win the game either way. But still, interestingly, all 5 games that were won in this match were won with the black pieces. So really incredible stuff, and you can see how it's not like, you know, in the old days, you know, if you had the black piece, you were like, okay, I have to defend. Players are just so good, and they work so hard on their defensive repertoires that they just, you know, prevail much more, it would seem, with the black pieces. But yeah, really exciting stuff. Really enjoyed the b4 idea by Esipenko, so hope you guys enjoyed that. I prefer showing games where ideas that start with b4 win, but I thought this was a very exciting game, so hope you guys don't mind. And now we will have Boris Gelfand versus Viswanathan Anand in the finals of the Leon Masters, but there are some other very strong events starting today, so we'll see if we will be able to cover most of them. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I would like to thank Mateo Jurjak, Alois Kolsterhaber, Kalman D, Valar Morgulis, and Steven Abrams for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the, the coverage of the Leon Masters, the finals, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.